I'm Dilek Tuna. You're watching A News. Let's see the headlines. US President Donald Trump calls off planned strikes on Iran in hopes of a deal being signed between Washington and Tehran. The death toll following a mass migration rush to Spain's Ceuta has risen to 72 as the European Union is set to hold urgent talks on Tuesday. And wildfires continue to burn across southern Europe, forcing thousands of people to leave their homes. US President Donald Trump says he's called off a planned military strike on Iran, claiming Tehran requested a pause to allow time for a deal to be reached. Iran, however, has denied Trump's claim and warned that it remains prepared if confrontation becomes inevitable. Here are the details.
In a social media post, President Trump stated the US was locked and loaded for a major attack on Iran. However, he agreed to stand down, claiming Middle Eastern nations requested a pause as the parameters of a rapid deal were agreed upon. Trump says any agreement requires Iran to end its nuclear program and immediately reopen the Strait of Hormuz. Meanwhile, Iranian military sources swiftly rejected his statement, branding it a new lie. Denying any requests for a deal, they stated that Iran's armed forces remain at peak readiness, warning that if a confrontation becomes inevitable, the battlefield will decide. The blockade of the Strait, a vital waterway for global oil shipping, along with the broader threat of war, has already caused significant fluctuations in global oil prices. Tensions between Washington and Tehran have been escalating since a previous ceasefire fell apart in June, leading to intense tit-for-tat strikes across the region. The cancellation of the US strikes comes after Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince reportedly spoke with Trump to express concern over the planned attacks. Meanwhile, Iran's foreign minister warned that any aggression by the US or Israel would face a decisive and proportionate response. Despite the current pause in military action, the US government has issued a security alert, urging Americans across the Middle East to maintain heightened vigilance and be prepared for potential airspace closures and travel disruptions.
As tensions between Iran, Israel and the United States escalated, many expected the Middle East to split into rival camps. That never happened. Here's why.
Every major war reshapes more than the battlefield. It changes alliances. It often divides regions into rival camps. That was the expectation when Israel, Iran and the United States confronted each other earlier this year. But that did not happen. Instead, most Arab states avoided taking sides, maintaining relations with both camps. So why did one of the Middle East's biggest crises fail to split the region? An analysis by Modern Diplomacy says the answer lies in a long-term shift. Many governments are moving away from fixed alliances. Instead, they are pursuing flexibility, diversification, and strategic autonomy. For decades, regional security depended on major outside powers, but confidence in any single global power has declined. As the world becomes more multipolar, Middle Eastern states are expanding ties with a wider range of partners. The goal is simple: reduce dependence and keep more options open. The Gulf already reflects this approach. Saudi Arabia remains a security partner of the United States. At the same time, it has expanded economic ties with China. It has restored relations with Iran. And it has left the door open to future engagement with Israel. The United Arab Emirates has strengthened ties with Israel while maintaining dialogue with Tehran. Qatar and Oman have also preserved relations with a wide range of regional players. The analysis says this is not neutrality. It is a strategy known as hedging. Countries maintain ties with competing powers to maximize flexibility instead of choosing one side. The analysis says power in the Middle East is also being redefined. Military partnerships still matter, but economic strength, investment, technology and diplomacy are becoming just as important. Today, security is measured not only by alliances. It is also shaped by the diversity of a country's international relationships. The Iran-Israel-US confrontation did not create a new regional order. Instead, it exposed one that was already emerging, a Middle East driven less by blocs and more by pragmatism, flexibility, and keeping every option open.
A former senior Israeli defense official says Israel should seize what he described as a historic opportunity to pursue agreements with Lebanon and Syria, arguing that military gains must now be turned into lasting political achievements.
Former Brigadier General Dror Shalom, who until recently headed the Political Military Bureau at Israel's Ministry of Defense and now a senior advisor at JP Morgan, has called on Israel to pursue understandings with Syria and an agreement with Lebanon that could lead to Hezbollah's disarmament. Speaking in an interview, Shalom described developments on Israel's northern front as a historic opportunity.
Syria and Lebanon. This is an historic opportunity. The Syrian president, of course, I'm suspicious of him, but he needs the Americans. We have to create maybe some sort of understandings with him. You can create a real change. And also in Lebanon, we can reach an agreement with them and then dismantle Hezbollah of its arms.
Shalom also called for international forces to be deployed along the Lebanese border to act against Hezbollah, rather than relying on the current UN peacekeeping mission. He said Israel should cut Hezbollah's supply chain through Syria and take the initiative before other countries forced it to accept decisions it did not want. According to Shalom, Israel's military capabilities were impressive, but military power alone would not be sufficient without strategic planning and political initiatives. Shalom said Israel needed to define the desired endpoint before committing military forces and conducting further operations. Turning to Gaza, Shalom described the return of the hostages as a moral obligation. He thanked US President Donald Trump and those who protested in support of the hostages. Asked whether the hostages could have been brought back earlier, Shalom said decisions could have been taken sooner and that more hostages could have returned. He said Israel should now advance Trump's 20-point plan for Gaza and create an alternative to Hamas. Shalom added that Israel should work with Jordan, Egypt and Gulf countries to build an initiative supported by Arab states. On Iran, he supported the military attack on Iran's nuclear capabilities, describing it as the correct decision. He also argued that Israel should deepen the Abraham Accords and expand cooperation with countries including Azerbaijan, Cyprus, Greece and Japan, as well as European and Nordic states.
Israeli airstrikes have hit several areas of the Gaza Strip, with Palestinian officials reporting casualties and damage to a medical supply warehouse at a hospital in central Gaza. One strike in Deir al-Balah reportedly hit near Al-Aqsa Hospital, damaging a medical supply warehouse. Hospital officials said one person was killed and another critically injured in a separate strike on a nearby house. Another airstrike in Gaza City's Sheikh Radwan neighborhood reportedly killed 2 people and injured several others. That's according to Palestinian medical sources. Head of the Palestinian National Council described the strike as a violation of international humanitarian law. In Kyiv, a Russian drone struck a warehouse for Ukraine's largest online retailer, Rozetka, killing 1 employee and injuring 7 others. The strike followed a broader overnight assault that damaged the Lithuanian embassy and residential areas. In retaliation, Ukrainian strikes killed 2 people in Russia's Saratov region, hitting an oil refinery and the Engels airbase. Meanwhile, a logistics hub for Russian retail giant Wildberries was set ablaze in the Samara region. Kyiv frequently targets the EU-sanctioned company, which supplies military equipment to Russian forces. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio says the United States will seek to restart peace talks between Russia and Ukraine in the coming weeks. In an interview with Fox News, Rubio said Washington is looking for opportunities to revive negotiations, but acknowledged that both sides continue to hold firm positions that remain difficult to reconcile.
You're going to see some efforts over the next few weeks to see if we can't restart talks between the two sides and bring this war to an end. But we also understand that both sides have some pretty strong red lines, and until we can bring those red lines a little closer together, we're not going to be there yet. But we're ready to go, and the President's told his team, if you see an opportunity to be a force that brings about some momentum behind peace talks, let's do it.
At least 3 people have been killed and 21 others injured in a bomb explosion outside an upscale restaurant in central Moscow. Authorities have not said who they believe was behind the attack. The blast occurred near the Balzi Rossi Italian restaurant at Kudinskaya Square shortly before 8 p.m. on Saturday. Russia's anti-terrorism committee said a woman carrying a homemade bomb tried to enter the restaurant but was stopped by a security guard. The woman, the guard and a restaurant customer were killed in the explosion, while the area was sealed off by heavily armed police. Russian media reported that the device may have been detonated remotely and that the woman might not have known she was carrying a bomb. Europe is facing a severe new border crisis after a deadly and unprecedented migrant surge into the Spanish territory of Ceuta. At least 72 people have died after 50,000 migrants breached the border in a matter of days. Spanish authorities are now installing floating sea barriers and conducting mass deportations to regain control.
Spanish authorities are deploying a 500-metre floating barrier off the coast of Ceuta to seal a highly vulnerable transit point between Africa and the European Union. The pneumatic blockade follows an unprecedented border breach where 50,000 migrants rushed the Spanish enclave in just 48 hours, a chaotic surge that left at least 72 people dead.
We believe that the barrier we are looking at, these buoys, could also be vulnerable in the future, because anyone could swim in and get past it very easily. We have requested that this breakwater be extended.
While police unions criticise the barrier as insufficient, troops have already escorted more than 48,000 people back into Morocco. Despite the rapid returns, local authorities say the city remains paralysed.
Ceuta has not returned to normal. There are still several thousand people in Ceuta who must be returned, and the atmosphere among the population remains marked by unease and concern.
The border collapse is now triggering a severe diplomatic rift. Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez defended Madrid's rapid response, noting authorities prevented the migrants from reaching mainland Europe. However, he slammed selfish member states that used the crisis to demand Spain's temporary exclusion from the Schengen area. Following an urgent appeal by 22 nations led by Italy and Denmark, EU leaders will hold an extraordinary video summit this Tuesday to forge a unified border strategy.
Wildfires are forcing thousands of people from their homes across southern Europe. Strong winds are driving flames towards communities in Greece, while crews in France and Spain are confronting renewed outbreaks.
Gale force winds pushed flames towards communities northwest of Athens, forcing emergency crews to retreat in some areas. More than 300 firefighters, supported by aircraft and dozens of vehicles, were deployed near Porto Gemino, but the shifting winds complicated operations.
The situation is extremely hard, especially today. We have really strong winds, gusts exceeding 73 kilometres an hour. The direction of the fire can't be determined easily. Our brothers, the firefighters, are the ones fighting the massive battle.
More than 200 people were evacuated by sea from Agios Vasileios, while another 12 were rescued from a beach in Porto Gemino. In nearby Kreopigadi, residents watched helicopters conduct repeated water drops as smoke surrounded their homes.
5 years ago, we escaped when the fire came within 50 meters of us, and today we're trying to escape it again. Every summer when we come here, we live with the fear of whether our home will burn. We live and breathe with this fear.
In southeastern France, officials were cautiously optimistic after firefighters made progress against a blaze that reignited in the mountainous Gros Bessillon region. The fire burned around 1,800 hectares and forced 2,800 people to evacuate, while some 1,500 firefighters remained deployed.
Tomorrow the winds will shift to the south, which should bring humidity, but the forecast is only predicting 35%. We're still far from the levels we'd prefer, which would be 60 to 70 or even 80%. But at least we're taking what we can get, and that's better than the last 2 days.
Spain reported new outbreaks in León, but improving conditions allowed evacuated communities to reopen in Zamora and Castellón. Major fires in Madrid and Avila were also stabilised.
And over in India, at least 2 people have died after heavy rain triggered widespread flooding across the country's southern state of Kerala. Floodwaters submerged streets, homes and businesses, while residents in some areas were forced to use boats to travel through inundated neighbourhoods. Authorities said hundreds of people had been rescued, while dozens of homes were either destroyed or left uninhabitable. The India Meteorological Department has issued warnings of further heavy rain to extremely heavy rainfall, raising concerns that flooding could worsen in the coming days. At least 5 people are dead and 41 remain missing after a passenger ferry caught fire off the coast of Indonesia. The vessel was carrying 271 people and travelling towards South Sulawesi when the blaze broke out Sunday morning. Search and rescue teams have managed to pull 225 survivors to safety. Operations are still underway to locate the missing, while the cause of the fire remains under investigation. Hungary is bracing for a severe energy crisis as extreme heat and drought force the country's only nuclear power plant to shut down. The facility is halting operations for the first time in over 40 years after the Danube River, which is used to cool the reactors, dropped to record lows. With temperatures expected to reach 40 degrees Celsius, the government is now weighing mandatory electricity restrictions for major companies to prevent a grid collapse.
We are facing the most critical 5 days ahead. Tomorrow, the PAX power plant will not be generating electricity, while the hottest 40-degree days are ahead. The power grid, our public services, and ourselves will all come under enormous strain. The Protection Working Group will meet again today, and based on the current consumption, production, import and water level data, it will decide whether mandatory consumption restrictions will be necessary for large companies from tomorrow. The government decree required to order the mandatory reduction in consumption came into force yesterday, and we will apply it if necessary.
7 OPEC Plus countries met virtually on Sunday to approve an increase in oil production quotas for September. The countries decided to implement a production adjustment of 188,000 barrels per day. Saudi Arabia, Russia and 5 other core members have raised monthly quotas for most of this year, although war-related disruptions have limited actual supply. The September increase would complete the rollback of 1.65 million barrels per day in cuts agreed in 2023. Turkey and Iraq have signed a 1-year agreement to keep the Iraq-Turkey crude oil pipeline in operation, while negotiations continue on a long-term framework. The deal signed in Ankara by Turkey's state pipeline operator Botas and Iraq's state oil companies SOMO and NOC keeps open a key export route with a daily capacity of up to 750,000 barrels of crude oil. Turkish Energy Minister called the pipeline a strategic energy corridor, saying it strengthens the bilateral cooperation and global energy security as Gulf disruptions increase demand for alternative export routes. He added that Turkey hopes to expand the pipeline's use in future, potentially transporting crude from Iraq and other Gulf producers. A state visit is often measured by official meetings and signed agreements, but some visits reveal a much bigger story. In this A News Explainer, we look beyond the protocol to examine what President Ilham Aliyev's visit to Kyrgyzstan says about Azerbaijan's evolving ties with Central Asia. From strategic partnership and regional integration to the quieter diplomacy that shapes relationships over time.
They played golf. They signed an alliance treaty. 6 presidents met informally. And the First Ladies visited a children's rehabilitation centre. 1 trip, 4 stories, 1 message. President Ilham Aliyev's state visit to Kyrgyzstan was not one event. It unfolded on 3 levels: a bilateral alliance, a wider regional format, and a human dimension beyond the negotiating table. First, the bilateral track. In Cholpon-Ata, Azerbaijan and Kyrgyzstan elevated their relations to an allied partnership. The centerpiece was a new treaty on allied relations, the highest level of formal cooperation between the 2 states. The agreement reaches far beyond protocol. It covers political coordination, security, defense, trade, transport, energy, digital development, agriculture and tourism. If either country sees a threat of armed attack from a third state, the 2 sides will hold consultations and consider assistance within their legal obligations. They also agreed not to join blocs directed against one another. The economic message was equally clear. The capital of the Joint Development Fund will double from $100 million to $200 million. In other words, the visit did not merely confirm friendship, it gave that friendship a new legal, security and economic architecture. But the trip was not only bilateral. Leaders of Azerbaijan, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, Tajikistan and Turkmenistan also gathered in Cholpon-Ata for an informal meeting. For President Aliyev, this was his first participation in the consultative format as a full member rather than an invited guest. The symbolism matters. Azerbaijan increasingly presents itself not as a neighbor watching Central Asia from across the Caspian, but as part of the same political, transport and economic space. This is why transport, logistics and access to global markets remained central to the wider regional conversation. And then came the Gulf. A day earlier, the presidents of Azerbaijan, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan and Tajikistan opened the Issyk-Kul Golf Club together. It was tourism, it was ceremony, but it was also informal diplomacy. Time spent together away from speeches and negotiating tables. Formal summits produce documents. Informal moments often build the trust needed to sign them. First Lady Mehriban Aliyeva joined Kyrgyzstan's First Lady Aygul Japarova and Uzbekistan's First Lady Ziroatkhon Mirziyoyeva at the Altan Balaluk Health and Rehabilitation Center. The center has operated since 2022. It has 136 rooms and 800 beds. Each summer, it receives between 8,000 and 8,500 children from Kyrgyzstan and neighboring countries. During the rest of the year, it supports children with disabilities through rehabilitation programs. This part of the visit carried no treaty and no geopolitical declaration. Its message was quieter. Cooperation is also measured by what reaches families, children and communities. So, what happened in Kyrgyzstan? An alliance treaty reshaped bilateral ties. An informal summit drew Azerbaijan further into Central Asia's regional architecture. Gulf offered space for personal diplomacy, and Altan Balalik gave the visit a human face.
And that's the news for this hour. Stay tuned to A News for all the latest updates.